Why is it that really smart people sometimes miss very obvious things? It happens all the time. Now, I'm not taking anything away from smart people who are very successful and they accomplish all sorts of things. They can be very effective in gameplay and treasure hunts and problem solving in the workplace and all sorts of things. And yet, even amid that, sometimes your superpowers can be your kryptonite. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit here. And these are things that we can all learn from. Whether you consider yourself to be a smart person or not, these are all traps that we can fall into that are thinking traps. So I've jotted down 5, and we're going to go through those together. And then I want to stick around, and then I'm going to give you 6 ways that you can start to fight against those traps. So the first one is the first reason why smart people oftentimes miss obvious things is pattern recognition skills. Really gifted, smart people develop complex, nuanced pattern recognition skills. They notice the nuances and they notice the different patterns and so forth around them. They can see patterns quickly and they identify the pattern and then they're ready to move on. So the problem with this is you can also overlook patterns that don't fit what's in your head. And it's an unanticipated pattern. So sometimes we all get into these kind of thinking ruts that have served us very, very well. Patterns and what I've called in other videos heuristics, habits of thinking. And we have pattern recognition heuristics or habits of thinking as well. And so we want to make sure that we don't fall into that trap. And stay with me on this video. And then at the end, I'll talk a little bit about some simple ways that we can address that. Another one that we can talk about is similar, but it's distinct. So if you're a very successful person in a field of study or an area, you have developed what we sometimes talk about as schemas or mental models. So when you're gathering this new information about some topic, it's not like you're just gathering random, unrelated information. You're looking at it and you're almost instantly categorizing it. You're putting it into you're giving it these labels, you're categorizing it as this versus this. You have these ways of hanging your ideas, almost like you put them on hangers and you hang them and you sort things. It's like how you sort your clothes. There's a certain pattern or habit that you have of doing that. Well, that's true for a lot of really smart people. And that's why when I talk about this in the academic world, we talk about the concept of disciplinary thinking. So if you're a mathematician and you're trained in a certain kind of mathematics and maybe your expertise in this is in a certain type of mathematics, you think like a mathematician. And that is different than how a biologist thinks or a physicist thinks or an accountant, for that matter, thinks. So you could be trained in a certain profession or a field, or a carpenter thinks, or maybe a plumber thinks. So as you're getting really skilled and gifted in a particular area, you develop these common schemas or mental models that many others in that area use as well. And those can be very, very helpful for accomplishing tasks in that field, for being successful. But when you encounter things that don't neatly fit into that mental model, you're either going to try to kind of crush them in there, or you dismiss them or disregard them because they don't fit your mental model very well. And that's where in the academic world we talk about interdisciplinary problem solving. So I learned to think like a mathematician, and I learned to think like a biologist, and I learned to think like an accountant, and I put those 3 together and I use them to solve a novel problem or come up with a creative solution. Well, this happens for all of us, not just in the academic world. This can happen in many different areas. And I know some people who watch my channel are really into the treasure hunting world and things like that. So do you have certain ways of trying to solve problems that are your go-to strategies? You've just sort of used them, but they've been successful for you in the past. They're these mental models, but they don't always hold up. So you have to actually develop some new mental models and mix things around. So that's an important one, the mental model, organizing your knowledge. It can blind you to the anomalies if you're not careful. The third one that I jotted down here is overconfidence. And this maybe goes without saying, but I think it's a really important one to actually say. So sometimes when we're really overconfident about something, we move a little too quickly. And our overconfidence causes us to kind of prematurely close off our consideration of other possibilities. So I've done my thinking, I know these patterns, I've seen this pattern before, I have my mental model, I have all these things, and so I've got it, here we go, let's move on. But if you do that too quickly, you can miss some important factors. So overconfidence can sometimes blind us from really important nuances and other facts if we're not careful. And it can cause us to be lazy and sloppy in our thinking if we're not careful as well. The fourth one is, I have a whole video on many of these, but this is one in particular that I've talked about in at least a couple of videos, is this idea of cognitive load. So cognitive load, and again, if you want to get into this in more detail, you can go back to some of the other videos, but cognitive load is this idea that your brain only has the capacity to handle a certain amount of input at one time. And so you have your eyes, you have your ears, you have your various senses. So you can actually look at one thing and really concentrate, and then you can hear something at the same time. So you're getting input from two different senses simultaneously, and that can actually enhance your learning. But if you're trying to listen to 5 different things at the same time, that causes what's called cognitive overload, and it becomes hard to listen to any one thing well unless you get really good at tuning out the ones that are irrelevant. So maybe there are 5 sounds that are coming in, so you learn to really identify what are the most important sounds, and you sort of ignore the others. It's a capacity for really good, effective concentration. So when you're hard at work, when your brain is working very hard, you're taking on a lot because you have the capacity. Smart people like to take on big, complex challenges. And so you're balancing all these things in your mind, but there is a limit to what you can keep in your mind at the same time, that you can keep aware of at the same time. So how do you decide what to disregard and what to pay attention to? That's where the cognitive load abstraction. So this is something that smart people are always balancing. They're always, and what they often do is that they chunk things in a way that makes it easier. So for example, if you have to remember 100 numbers, that's really, really hard to do. But what if you take the numbers and you break them up into chunks? And so they're, instead of its single digit numbers, it's a collection of 5-digit numbers or 4-digit numbers or 3-digit numbers, something like that. So you have this method of how you organize it, or maybe you have a way of, again, using some of that pattern recognition or something to organize a big body of knowledge. The problem is when you do that, you are going to leave some things out. You're going to miss some other things intentionally. That's actually what you've learned as a smart person to do, is to intentionally get rid of the irrelevant stuff. So you're having to make decisions about what's relevant and irrelevant all the time, and sometimes you disregard the wrong things. It's like you're throwing a bunch of stuff into the trash and accidentally you throw your keys in the trash, and well, that's a problem, right? You don't want to throw the keys to the clues in the trash along the way unintentionally. Then the fifth one is one I had a video not too long ago I created on this, which is really smart people sometimes quickly jump from observation to interpretation. They jump to conclusions pretty quickly because they have a history of doing it very successfully. So they have an observation, oh, know what that is? Bam, got my conclusion, my interpretation, I'm moving on. And that can sometimes get in the way of actually solving a problem. So what do we do about all this? Well, I've already mentioned some of it in the video, but here are 6 quick thoughts. First one is slow down. Take your time. Do some slow thinking. Force yourself to slow down, look at things a few times, review, revisit. Second one is challenge your first thoughts. When you have a first thought and you think it's there, that's okay, but challenge it, push yourself, be the contrarian for yourself. Challenge and challenge yourself. Are you really sure about that? Or what other evidence, or what are some alternates that you can come up with? The third one is look for anomalies. So look for the things that don't fit your mental models. Look for the things that don't fit the pattern recognition habits that you've developed before. If you pay attention to those, it's going to bring them into front of mind, and that might just be what's needed to solve the problem. And the fourth one is give special attention to simple clues. Since smart people have a tendency to be drawn to the abstractions and the complexities, teach yourself to appreciate and pay attention to the simple things, and look at them and try to look at them differently and see what that might do for you. Another one is shock your system with Scamper. I have a whole video on Scamper. It's a problem solving or creative thinking. It's an acronym, the SCAMPER, but one of them, the last in the word, is reverse. And I'll just give this as an example. So this is how it can help you as a smart person to solve problems or not miss things, to discover those metaphorical and literal treasures. So there was an instance, for example, recently. I was in a conversation with people, and it was a kind of educational conversation. It was about the pathway to a particular career. And there are people that are really stuck that there's a certain way to get prepared for this career. You go to grad school for 3 years, you do an internship, and then you graduate and you move on. But there have been competing people saying, I don't think that's the only way to train people for that field. I think you could actually do it online or do it in other ways. And there was this pushback and there was this tension that was going on. So the people who believed in the traditional classroom 3-4 year process said that you were watering things down, doing things online. The people online were saying that no, you're just disregarding all the research on online learning and how there are many benefits to it. And you're in a certain context and situation, so you get things that you wouldn't get if you were just in the classroom for three years. So they were having this kind of debate. Well, an example of how you sort of force yourself out of just the debate, the either or, is ask a question that seems almost absurd. So no one in that debate is actually arguing for more than a 4-year pathway. So I might just reverse things. And if people say, and I might actually say, well, what if we made it the education 25 years long? What if we, instead of making it 4 years, what if you had to have 25 years of training to go into that field? Well, that seems like a really absurd thing, right? But then if you allow yourself to do a little bit more thinking, you realize, oh, wait a second. If I thought about it 25 years, obviously you can't go to school just for 25 years straight. You don't have any money or anything like that. So what if the learning just happened continually? And at a certain level, maybe after year 1 or 2, you can be an apprentice, and then level 3, you can do a little bit more and a little bit more, and then you reach, but your education just continues on and on and on. And so over time, you're actually even at a much higher level of performance than the person who did that on that gold standard 3 or 4 year model. So you get the idea. That was just an example in one field that I've come across, but you can do this in other areas. And check out that Scamper video if you want to see more of how you can use this to identify novel solutions, to identify problems you would have missed otherwise. And then the last one is going back to that observation and interpretation. Practice just observing without making any interpretations, any conclusions, any judgments. It is much harder to do than we often realize. So often we fall into this trap of, I see something, and even the initial statement is an interpretation, not an observation. So, for example, say you see a really horrific situation where there's a person, who is they have their fist out, and their fist is going toward the face of another person. Now, notice what I didn't say, that they're hitting the person, because the observation is much more just describing very specifically the actions that are happening. You're not naming them, you're not labeling them or anything. You're not jumping to the interpretation that there is a fight breaking out or anything. Now, it may obviously be a fight breaking out, that's possible, but the interpretation practice is force yourself to not jump to that. Just observe, just jot down without any judgment at all, if possible, exactly the actions, the things that you see, the colors, the movements, all that stuff. And then after you do that, you can go back and start to make some potential interpretations. But teaching yourself to separate those out regularly, developing that discipline, can help you avoid making a lot of false conclusions and mistakes. So there you have it. There are 5 common reasons why smart people, maybe you're one of those, make mistakes and miss things, and 6 ways that you can work your way through it. I hope you find this useful. I look forward to your comments.